Hey, Winterfest students, hope you had a great week this week. We are going into week number 5 with our 52 videos about truth, doubt, and trust, Winterfest 2021. And this week you get to hear from Brian Brophy. He's a youth minister in Kentucky and has a lot of experience, and he's going to talk to you about doubt and give you a couple of challenges in the end. So God bless you this week. Hope you're able to go back to church now at your church. If you are, man, that's such a blessing to be able to do that. And you have a great week next week at school. God bless.
Hey Winterfest students, this week I want to talk to you and challenge you to think about doubt and how it can actually cause your faith to grow. Several years ago in Oklahoma, there was a trial and it was for murder, and the guy that was on trial had a pretty good case against him. But there was a sticking point. They had never found the body of the victim. And so the last day of the trial, the defense attorney knew that his only chance at winning was going to be to pull a pretty risky stunt. So he got in front of the jury in his closing arguments and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in 1 minute, the man who is presumed dead in this case will walk through that door." Well, you could have cut the tension in the room with a knife. Every eyeball of every juror was fixed on that door as the seconds ticked off the clock. But when a minute came and went, the attorney turned back to the jury and he said, "Okay, I made that up, but you believed that it might be true, and that means that there is a reasonable doubt that the man presumed dead is actually dead. And the fact that you have a reasonable doubt demands that you return a verdict of not guilty." Now, I tell you that story to illustrate the fact that in our society, in our legal system, there is a place in which doubt plays a positive and constructive role. And yet I don't think there's anywhere else in our society that it does. Most other places, it's considered negative. If you're in a relationship and the other person's really into you and you're not, what do people say? Well, you're just afraid of commitment. If you're on a team and you don't really believe that the coach is leading you in the right directions and you question the coach, they say you're not a team player. You know, if you're in a class and the teacher or the professor is teaching things that you're not sure are right or true, and you wonder and express your reservations about that, you're just told that you're ignorant or closed-minded. And in church, oftentimes if we express doubt about what we're supposed to believe, people say, "Oh, ye of little faith." Ouch. I mean, shouldn't church be the place where we could talk about our doubts instead of having to hide them? Why is that? Well, I think a big part of the reason is there are some myths about doubt that we've bought into. The first of those is that if you doubt, it's because you have a lack of faith. The second is that any doubt is sinful. And the third myth is that doubt means that you're not okay with God. That in some way, if you have doubts in your heart, you don't have faith, you're a sinner, and God is not pleased with you. In fact, He doesn't even love you. You probably won't even be saved. So what do? We believe the myths and we bury the doubt, and we don't talk about it. Now, this is pretty personal to me because when I was 16, I knew I wanted to be in student ministry. So I went to Bible college and I got a Bible major and I was working with churches and I put all my eggs in that basket. But when I was 18, I was laying in my bed as a freshman in Bible college in my dorm room in the fetal position, terrified, because suddenly I didn't know if God even really existed. I was filled with doubts. Could I trust the Bible? Could I believe the stories and the miracles in it? Was my whole life being directed toward something that may not even be true? I don't know that I ever felt so alone. When I would pray, my prayers would hit the ceiling and fall down. When I would try to sing, I didn't get that mountaintop experience I'd once had. I just felt cold and alone. But then my sophomore year, there was a knock on the door, and a student named Brad walked in who was a freshman, and he said to me, I got to talk to somebody or I'm going to explode. I am filled with doubts, and I'm a Bible major. And in that moment, everything, all my fear, it all shattered because now it was out in the open. I told him how I felt. We talked about it together. We decided that the way to address this was to say to God, we promise we will continue to live faithful lives to you while you work this out in us. And we dove right into the scariest places of our doubts and looked for the answers we needed. And in that process, I think I found out a few things about doubt. I think we can replace the myths of doubt with some truths about doubt. And here's one of those truths: that God can save me even if my heart condemns me. During that time, I felt so much guilt and so much shame, and I thought, if I have this doubt, God must not love me. Surely I'm not even going to go to heaven. And then I found out that in the Bible, in 1 John 3, it says this: whenever our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. God knows that you have doubt, and that's okay. He doesn't need your heart to feel saved to save you. He doesn't need your heart to have full confidence in Him for Him to have full confidence in the blood of Jesus that's working in you. The second truth that I learned is that God actually created me in a way to cause doubts. These doubts aren't being put there by Satan. God created my body, my mind, my soul to have these doubts. Now, where did I get that? Well, listen. Erik Erikson and Jean Piaget are names you may have heard before. They are two of the most famous psychologists who ever lived. And they spent their entire lives devoted to this idea that we need to try and understand why people do what they do, how they make their decisions, what makes a person a person. Their work is incredible. And both of them identified various stages that people go through. When you're young, you think concretely. 1 + 1 is 2. If mom and dad told me something, that's just the way it is. But when you're old, they say, you think abstractly. And you're able to think not just 1 + 1 is 2, but there can be negative numbers. There can be numbers like infinity. There can be imaginary numbers. You can do calculus. Not just mom and dad told me so it is, but I can think philosophically. I can think about the reasons and the motivations behind mom and dad telling me those things. Mom and dad told me there was a magic fairy that took my teeth out from under my pillow. But when I'm older, I can think through that whole thing and decide whether I believe it or not. And that process takes place of changing from concrete thought to abstract thought somewhere between the ages of like 15 or 16 and 30, and a lot of it depends on the person, but somewhere in there you make that change. And when you make that change, you have to go in now and deconstruct all of your assumptions. So all those things that you thought concretely when you were young are like a wall, all right? It's like everything is a brick. Like mom and dad said that Noah had an ark. That's a brick in my wall. Mom and dad said that Jonah did that. The preacher said, and it's a brick, and it's a brick, and it's a brick. But abstractly now I have the ability to reason, and I have to go into my wall and I have to grab each brick and I have to deconstruct that wall and look at each brick and decide, do I still want this brick in my wall? Tooth fairy? No. Noah? Yes? I don't know. I have to look at all of those bricks and decide. Now, why would God do that? Well, if we assume that God created us, then that would mandate that He created this process, that He knew we would go. It's not a surprise to Him. We would think concretely, we would think abstractly, and we would have to deconstruct our faith. Why would God want us to deconstruct our faith? Because when we tear the wall down, we build a foundation, a set of ideals and principles upon which we decide things are true. And then we build our wall on that foundation. And when I tore my wall down, I started diving in. Can I trust the Bible? I wanted to see the evidence for myself. How do I know it wasn't just written 100 years ago? I dove into it. And I decided the standard of evidence that I would need. And you know what? God wasn't afraid of it. He wasn't afraid of my doubts or my questions. And I put that brick back on. And now that wall is built on a firm foundation. And it's so much stronger. Sometimes we call that finding our own faith instead of our parents'. So I think that we've learned these truths about God. I think we've learned these truths about doubt. And I think that if we embrace those, we realize that God gave us this physiological process that would cause us to doubt for the purpose of driving us towards Him and into deeper faith. You remember the story I told you at the beginning about the court case in Oklahoma? Well, when the jury came back, they found the defendant guilty. And the lawyer was irate. He said, "How can you return a guilty verdict? You had a reasonable doubt. I saw you look at the door." And the foreman of the jury said, "Yes, we all had our doubts and we all looked at the door, but we also noticed that your client did not look at the door because your client did not have any doubt that the man was dead." In that case, the man had no doubt and he was convicted and condemned. In your case, I believe the enemy wants to take the fact that you have doubt and without evidence condemn you before God. He wants to cry out that you are guilty, that you should be ashamed, and make you feel so bad that you will condemn yourself and walk away. But we serve a God who will go before you, who will fight over you, and will not give up. He's not afraid of the questions. Dive into Him. Let the doubt throw you towards Him. Whatever you do, don't be afraid of doubt. The two takeaways I want you to have is that doubt is okay, and that God uses doubt to grow faith. So this week, dive into God. Take your doubts to Him and say, "God, give me the answers I need." It may take time, but He will be faithful. Continue to trust Him even in your doubt. God bless you this week.